Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with the next installment of the pans that I hit in the last quarter. This year I'm tracking the pans that I'm hitting, and I go through them every 3 months with you guys to share with you what I hit in the previous quarter. And since we're now in October, I'm gonna go through what I hit pan on in quarter 3 of the year. This is actually the best quarter that I've had so far this year. I'm very excited to share with you the pans I have. Like I said, I mean, it was good. It was definitely more pans that I have had recently. So yeah, I'm just gonna go into the pans. But before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So I'm gonna go through these in chronological order. I'm gonna start with the one that I hit first in July, was it? Yeah, it must have been in July. So the first pan that I hit this quarter is in the shade Trust Issues in my Anastasia Jackie Aina palette. This wasn't in a project, it was just like a shade that I hit pan on because I was working on the shade Alliteration here. I'm still working on this one actually, and I just reached for this shade as like a side thing, just to try to pan on it, and I did. So that is the first eyeshadow that I hit pan on. It's a beautiful kind of gold leaning Inicona highlight. The second thing I hit pan on is actually a single eyeshadow. This is my glitter, pressed glitter from Colourpop in the shade Hungry Ghost. Hopefully you can see that, you can see it right there. I hit pan on this one too. I used this as a glitter highlighter when I went to a festival, and that's how I hit pan on it. I do use this on my eyes every now and then, but that's how I was able to hit pan, and I'm very excited about that because it's a beautiful glitter. I really love it that way. And it looks, in the pan it looks mainly like it has some goldeny glitter to it, but it's so dimensional when you swatch it out. It's similar to Phoenix from Terra Moons, if you have that or if you've seen that. It's similar, but obviously with a pressed glitter instead of using eyeshadow. So it's a beautiful shade, and I'm really happy to now have pan on it. And I'm a bit sad because I feel like this is going to go too quickly. I love this. It's probably one of my favorite pressed glitters, but yeah, it's always fun to have another pan in your collection. Next up we have a palette that you will see quite a lot in this video, or like I will share quite a few pans now, and then I have a few more to share later, and that is my Beauty Bay Wilderness palette. This was my level 5 Project Level Up palette, so that's why I have so many pans in here to share. So the first shade that I hit pan on in here is the shade Ray, which is the shade here. It's a beautiful kind of green leaning light shimmer shade or Inicona highlight. I love this eyeshadow. Next up I hit pan on Snow, which is just like a setting shade. Yeah, I use this to blend out eyeshadows. I don't really set my lids when I do eyeshadows, but I use this to blend out. Then the third eyeshadow I hit pan on, which is in like this group, is Fossil, which is this shade here. So that is the next eyeshadow, and it was also the 5th shade that I hit pan on this quarter. So we're gonna take a break from the Wilderness palette and move on to the next one. The next one comes from Natasha Denona Love palette, and I hit pan on the shade Commitment, which is this deep shade right here. You can see this is the only shade I had pan on in this palette. I had this in my panel eyeshadows, and I hit pan on this one, and it's a nice shade. I used this as like a deepening up shade and an eyeliner, and that's how I was able to pan on it. It is one of Natasha Denona's cream to powder formulas, which is, I love that formula. It's such a good kind of well-made matte eyeshadow formula, and yeah, I hit pan on this one next. Next up we have my Huda Beauty Nude Light Obsessions palette. I decided to use this shade here in the middle as like a blending out shade next, after I hit pan on the one in the Wilderness palette, and it's a tiny pan in here, but hopefully you can see it right there. I was able to pan on this one next, and yeah, and I used to reach for this one, so it wasn't in a project or anything, but I hit pan on this one. Then when I hit pan on that shade, I decided to move on to another blending out shade, and I went to one in my Book of Magic palette from Beauty Bay, and I decided to go with this shade here, which is called Vanish. Again, you can probably see a small pan in there, and again, this was my next blending out shade, so I hit pan on this one after the one in my Huda Beauty Nude Light palette. After that eyeshadow, we're going to move back to my Wilderness palette. Again, we have the 2 remaining eyeshadows that I hit pan on in my Project Level Up. The next one I hit pan on in order is the shade Lime, which is this shade down here. It's like a beautiful kind of green shade. It's my favorite type of green eyeshadow, so I hit pan on this one next. And then lastly for this palette, I hit shade on the shade Breeze, which is this one here, which is more of a kind of turquoisey, kind of more blue leaning green. And yeah, that is the last one I hit pan on in this palette and in my Project Level Up. We're sticking with our Beauty Bay palettes, and we have another one to share with you in my Book of Magic palette, and that is the shade Elixir, which is this shade down here. This one was in my Pandas eyeshadows, and I pan on that one there. It's not my favorite type of blue, but it was, you know, it's enough to reach for, and the pans in the Beauty Bay palettes are very shallow, so they are relatively easy to pan on, but that was the next one I hit my goal on. And next up we actually have another Beauty Bay palette. We have the Nikki Tutorials and Beauty Bay collaboration, and I hit pan on the shade Basic Truths, which is the next one I decided to be my blending out shade, and it's the shade there in the center, which is the nude shade. So this is the one I focused on next after hitting pan in the Book of Magic palettes. Next up we have another palette that was rolled in for my product level up, and this was my level 1 palette, so I hit one pan in here, and that is the Blueberry Muffins palette from BH Cosmetics. This one mine looks like it has a lot of pans, but the pan I hit this past quarter is the shade Hot and Fresh down here. It's like a light silver shade, and I use this mainly as an inner highlights. Next up we have one of my favorite palettes in my collection that doesn't get enough love, and that is my Club Nebula palette by Eyeshadows in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. I hit pan on the shade Firefly, which is this one up here. It's a beautiful green kind of duochrome shade, and it's stunning. I used this as an inner highlight and on my lids. And I rolled this into one of my projects. I wanted to pan on one more additional shade in here, but yeah, so I just focus on that one because it's one of my favorite shades. And I'm currently also working on a Queen of Blades, which is the shade here in a different project. But yeah, that is the next shade that I pan on. So we're getting towards the end of the shades. We only have 3 more to talk about, but the next one again comes from my Book of Magic palette by Beauty Bay. I had another shade in my projects. I had the shade Alchemy, which is this shade up here in a project, and as you can see again, I was able to pan on this eyeshadow. I know this one took a little bit longer than you know, some other shimmers that I've had from Beauty Bay, because it's not the putty kind of formula, it's more like a regular shimmer formula. But again, the pans are very shallow, so it still didn't take very long. But yeah, that is the next eyeshadow I hit pan on. The second to last eyeshadow I hit pan on comes from my Beauty Bay Love Notes palette. Again, another Beauty Bay palette. I've been trying to give them some more love because I haven't reached for them very much before this past couple of months. So I just wanted to give them a bit more love in the last quarter. But this shade was actually also rolled into my whole collection for the pan, I believe it was. And that is the shade Pillow down here. I hit pan on this really fast. This is the opposite to the other shade that I talked about, the Alchemy shade. That is more, like I said, the traditional shimmer formula, whereas this is like the more putty-like formula, which I have in majority of the shimmers. So this one was really fast to hit pan on, but that is the next one. Then the last eyeshadow I hit pan on in this quarter is a very exciting one because it comes from my Panda palette. This one is my Modern Renaissance palette, and I actually pan on this on the last day of the month, and it's also the last eyeshadow in here that I didn't have pan on, and that is the shade Love Letter. You can see it right there. That is the last eyeshadow I pan on in this quarter, and again, my palette is looking very well loved now. I'm so happy to see it, and you know, it's always fun. And now again, I have pan on every single shade in here, so it automatically feels way more loved than when I had an eyeshadow here with an out pan on it, because then it just looked like I had an eyeshadow that was barely touched. But again, it looks way more well loved now, and that is the final eyeshadow I hit pan on. So this is me on a different day. I realized when I was editing this video that I completely forgot to mention all the eyeshadows that I finished, because normally in these videos I include all the eyeshadows I pan on and all the eyeshadows I finished in the last quarter, and I completely forgot to mention the ones that I finished. So I have them right here, and I'm going to go through them. So I'm going to start with the one I finished first. So the first eyeshadow that I finished came from my Modern Renaissance palette, and this palette is basically, you're gonna see most of the shades in here, but the first shade I finished in Q3 was the shade Venetian Red, which is this shade here. This one I finished, I finished that quite early on, I think, but yeah, that's the first shade that I finished. The second shade I finished also came from this palette, and that is the shade Primavera right here. It was like a golden shade, and Venetian Red was like a very similar shade to Love Letter, slightly more, was like plummy. And yeah, Primavera was like a shimmery light gold, so I finished that one next. The third eyeshadow I finished actually does not come from my Modern Renaissance palette, but Colourpop Super Shock Shadow. I have since reused this packaging for something else. I currently have something else in it, but that was the shade Lightning Bug, and I finished this in my Rolling Project pan. So yeah, this one was finished there, and that's the third eyeshadow. And then lastly, I did finish my fourth eyeshadow this quarter. I did actually finish the shade Burnt Orange as well, so I did finish 4 eyeshadows this year, but this one right here was Quite similar to Raw Sienna, I use slightly more orange. This one is a slightly more kind of mustardy shade, but that is the last shade I finished. But I did finish 4 eyeshadows in the past quarter, which is really, really good. It's the best quarter I've had so far, but I think that's kind of due to happen when you do like a band of palettes, for example, because you get used on multiple shades and then you finish them up more towards the end of the year. So fingers crossed I can finish a few more next quarter, but that is it for this part of the video. I'm going to jump back to the original footage. So those were all of the things that I hit pan on in the past quarter. I only had eyeshadows this time, no kind of face product that I hit pan on. Yeah, I used hit pan on eyeshadows, so I counted them up and I had 17 pans hit this past quarter, and which is really good. In total this year so far I've hit 41 pans, so you know that's really good. Last year I wanted to hit pan on 100 eyeshadows and I did that. I think I hit pan on like 101 eyeshadows or 102, something like that. But yeah, this year I'm not gonna hit that, and it wasn't really my plan. My plan is just to rotate through my palette more, but I'm really happy with 41 pans. If I can get past like 50 this year, which I would definitely should, I'll be very happy with that. If I can get to 60, that would probably be my like max I think it can have, like it hits this year. That would be amazing. But that is again where I am with the palettes that I hit pan on, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what the last thing you hit pan on was, and otherwise I hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys.